Hi everybody, so in this video we're going to be talking about another method to graph parabolas. So you should have already seen the method where we're using base graphs and transformations, and this we're going to talk about how to graph using X intercepts. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is find the X intercepts. Okay. And then we are going to find the X value that is halfway between them. Okay. The reason that we're interested in that X value is because this is the X value for the vertex. Okay. Remember, we were calling the X value for the vertex H. Okay. Okay. So we can plug in this X value to get its corresponding Y value, okay, which we were calling K. Okay. Then we can graph the vertex. Okay. And that will allow us to draw our parabola. Okay, so let's go ahead and practice this. Okay. So we're going to look at an example where it's already in factored form. Okay. So we're going to find the X intercepts, and we do that by setting Y equal to 0. Okay. And now we know that we can solve this by setting each factor equal to 0 and solving those equations. So we get two solutions, -1 and 0. Oh, I'm sorry, and +1. Okay. And each of those corresponds to an X intercept. Okay. So let's go ahead and start our graph. Okay. So we're going to start by looking at our graph here. Okay. And we're going to graph our two X intercepts. So our X intercepts were at -1, 0 and +1, 0. Okay. So we know the vertex is halfway in between them. So the halfway point is going to be 0. Okay. So I know that the X value of my vertex, which we were calling H, is 0. Okay. And now I'm going to plug this in to find my corresponding Y value. Okay. This gives me -1. So my vertex is going to be 0, -1. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my graph. I look at the point 0, -1. Okay. And then I complete my parabola knowing that that's the vertex. Okay. All right. Let's look at another example of graphing using this technique. Okay. Okay, so we're going to start the same way. We're going to let Y equal 0, and we're going to find the X intercepts. Okay, set each of my factors equal to 0. And I get two solutions, x equals 3 and x equals -1. So my two intercepts are 3, 0 and -1, 0. Okay, so let's look at my graph. Okay, so my x-intercepts are going to be at 3, 0 and negative 1, 0. Okay, now my vertex is going to be halfway between them, so you can see the point that's halfway between them is x equals 1. Okay, so that's going to be the x coordinate of my vertex. So I'm going to plug this in to get my y coordinate. Okay, so this will give me negative 2 times 2, which is negative 4. So my vertex is going to be 1, negative 4. Okay, so I'm going to go 1, negative 4. Okay, that's my vertex. And I draw in my parabola. Okay. All right. Let's look at an example of when we might do this when it's not already in factored form. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start by letting y equal 0. Okay. And then I'm going to try to go ahead and factor this. Okay, so I'm looking for two things that multiply to negative 15 and add to 2. So I think it should be plus 5 and minus 3. Okay, set each of my factors equal to 0. Okay, and this gives me my two x-intercepts, negative 5, 0, and 3, 0. Okay, so I'm going to start looking at my graph here. Okay, so negative 5, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so negative 5, 0, and then 3, 0. Okay, so I'm going to look at the point that's halfway in between them. Okay, so I'm just going to do this visually. Okay, and I get that my x value is negative 1. Okay. Okay, and then I'm just going to plug this back into my equation to get my corresponding y value. Okay, so I get 1 minus 2 minus 15, okay, which is negative 16. Okay, so this means that my vertex is going to be negative 1, negative 16. Okay, because negative 16 is so big, I'm going to go ahead and go by 2's on my y-axis here. So this would be 2, so negative 2, negative 4, negative 6, negative 8, negative 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. Okay, so here's my negative 16. Oops, sorry, it should be at negative 1, negative 16. Okay, and then I'm going to draw in my parabola. Okay. All right. So now that you guys have seen this method, okay, let's talk about how you decide which method for graphing you should use. Okay, so here's how I decide. Okay. Okay. So you're going to look at the form. Okay, so if you have something that's just like 2x squared, right, x squared plus 1, Okay, something that is a really simple transformation you're going to use for transformations to graph. Okay, that's a clear time that you should use the transformations because it's such a simple transformation. Okay. All right. Then if it's not one of those, okay, you're going to check what form the equation is in. Okay. So the first choice is it's in vertex form. Okay. Then you're going to use the method described in the previous video. Okay. If it's in factored form, okay, you're going to use the method that we just described. Okay. Right, the one that we use in example 1, okay, the X intercepts. Okay. And then the last thing that could happen is this in standard form? Okay. And this is the trickiest one, okay? So then you have to ask yourself some questions, okay? So does it factor? Okay. If it does, then I would say you want to use X intercepts. If it doesn't, okay, then I would say move on. Okay. So if it doesn't, the next thing we're going to try is complete the square. Okay. And then use the vertex method. Okay. All right. So let's see an example of looking at some that are in standard form and deciding what method we should use. Okay. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, I know this is standard form, I'm going to try factoring this. Okay, so is there anything that multiplies to -8 and adds to -2? Yes, -4 and +2. Okay, so because this factors, I'm going to use the X intercept method. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to find the X intercepts by setting y equal to 0. Okay. So now I can set each of my factors equal to 0. Okay, and I have my two X intercepts, 4 and -2. Okay, so let's look at my graph. Okay, so I'm going to mark my X-intercepts -2, 0, and 4, 0. Okay, and then I'm going to look for the point that's halfway between them. Okay. So that's going to give me an H value of 1. Okay, and I'm going to find the corresponding Y value by plugging this in. Okay, so 1 minus 2 is -1, minus 8 is -9. Okay, so my vertex is going to be 1, -9. So I'm going to go to 1. Again, I'm going to mark these as 2. Okay, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. Oops, 1, negative 9, sorry. Okay, and I'm going to draw my parabola. Okay. All right. Let's look at our next example. Okay, so I'm going to try to factor this. Okay, and I'm looking for things that multiply to 7, so it's really just 1 and 7. Okay, so this is going to be 7 plus 1 is 8. Those don't add to 4. That's not going to work. Okay, it's prime. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is complete the square. Okay, so I'm going to start by grouping my first two terms together, and if there was a leading coefficient, I would want to factor that out now. Okay. Now I'm going to find out what number needs to go in here. So I'm going to take the coefficient of x, which is 4, divide it by 2, and square it. So I get 2 squared, which is 4. Okay. So I'm going to put plus 4 and minus 4. Okay. Just like the complete the square section. All right. So now I'm going to factor this as a square. So what multiplies to 4 and adds to 4? It's 2 and 2. Okay, and then I'm going to combine my like terms. 7 minus 4 is 3. Okay, you can see now why we spent so much time completing the square. This is vertex form. Okay, and my vertex is -2, 3. Okay, so let's look at my graph. Okay, so my vertex was -2, 3. Okay, so that puts my vertex here. Okay, and my coefficient is 1, which means the distance between this one and my other two key points is 1, +1. Okay, so we know they're always on either side, and then the vertical distance between them is marked by this coefficient here, which is 1. Okay, so that gives me my parabola. Okay. All right, let's do one more example of this. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is try to factor this. Okay. All right, so this does factor. What multiplies to -3 and adds to -2? It should be -3 and +1. Okay, and I'm going to find my x-intercepts by letting y equal 0. Okay, so I can set my factors, my factors equal to 0. Okay, and this gives me my 2 x-intercepts. Okay, so I'll have 3, 0, and -1, 0. Okay, so let's look at what our graph would look like. Okay. So I'm going to start with 3, 0, and negative 1, 0. Yep. Okay. So 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, negative 1, 0. Okay. And then I'm going to look at my vertex being halfway between them. Okay. So that's going to give me an H value of 1. Okay. And I'm going to find the corresponding y value by plugging this into my original equation. Okay. Okay, so I'll get 2 minus 4 minus 6. Okay, so I should get negative 8. Okay, so my vertex is going to be 1, negative 8. Okay. So 1, negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. And I'm going to draw in my parabola. Okay. All right. I hope this helps you guys understand the two main methods for graphing parabolas and when you should be using each one. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you guys soon.